Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast, your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. As we're all thinking ahead to spring, it's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Your honeybees may be malnourished after what it was a pretty rough winter. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. So with spring approaching, now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Beekeepers are kind of like the last of the cowboys you've seen in the westerns. We migrate the bees from up in the northern prairies all down here to the Bakersfield area, and we keep them in the west side of the valley. When the spring bloom comes, we'll take the bees and we'll spread them from the Turlock area down to the southern Bakersfield area. The almond pollination is the biggest pollination event in the U.S. bee industry. It takes almost the entire national bee supply.
And so a semi-truck will hold somewhere around 400 to 450 hives of bees. And so you start thinking about this, if it takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million hives of bees in California, say, a couple 100,000 of them are already there, maybe 250,000 of them are already there. So that means the rest of those beehives have to come from someplace else. So there's a lot of truckloads of bees crisscrossing the United States.
Our honeybees get picked up and moved almost 22 times a year. And a lot of people think that this is one of the reasons why our bees are not surviving like they used to. But we've been pollinating fruits and vegetables and nuts since the 70s, 60s, 50s. And we haven't had these kind of losses.
And that's from the movie The Pollinators that we'll be discussing today with our guest, Peter Nelson.
Well, that little clip was a good summary of a lot of this movie that people are going to get to see, Jeff. I like the reference to cowboys. I think that's from Following the Bloom back about 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Brett Adie and then Dave Hackenberg talks about the numbers, and then Davey talks about how often they're moved. And the only thing we didn't get a little bit of in that clip was comments on the diversity of what we need agriculture to go back to. And there's a lot of that in the movie, John Lundgren and some of the rest. So I tell you what, why don't we go ahead and get a hold of Peter and take it the next step?
I think that's a great idea. This is a fun movie, and look forward to talking to Peter. Welcome, Peter, to the Beekeeping Today podcast. Kim and I have been looking forward to talking to you for a couple weeks now, ever since we heard about your film, The Pollinators.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm really, really delighted to be able to talk to you all about it.
It's good to meet you in person, Peter. I've watched your film, I think 3 times I made it through, and I could not I watched it on my cell phone. I couldn't put it down. And
that's awesome.
An easy way to watch a movie, certainly, but it was, knowing a lot of the people that you worked with, it was fascinating to see them in the situations that you were at and to hear them talk about what they do for a living.
Well, yeah, thanks very much. That's really nice. And I knew there'd be a lot of people that you would know on here in particular.
Well, but before we get going, why don't you tell us a little bit about the project and why you were interested in doing this film, The Pollinators, and what actually got you started down this road?
Okay, well, I've been a beekeeper for about 30 years, sort of a backyard beekeeper, and so I have a great interest in honeybees, of course, and I also have a great interest in food and agriculture, and sort of combined all those things into making a film. My day job, if you will, is I'm a cameraman or a director of photography, is the fancy way to put it. And I wanted to kind of put all these kind of interests together in a film. And I didn't really feel like there's some great films about honeybees out there. And I really felt like the story that wasn't told was about these commercial beekeepers and their importance to our food system and our agriculture system. And so I wanted to kind of connect those dots a little bit. I thought doing a film about it might be the best way for me to do that.
Oh, cool. Well, it's a really good job, and I really enjoyed watching the show.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I like the way that you tied the beekeeping industry and agriculture. Agriculture, of course, the two sides of agriculture. You worked with the pesticide side, and you worked with the soil health side. And my background is before bees was farming, so I really I'm been aware of that tie. Lots of people haven't been. It was good to hear you bring in the people that you did, Jonathan Lundgren and the rest, to talk about what's doing. I know his work is getting, I should say, more attention, as it should be, and I'm glad that you picked up on that. What did you learn from him other than what we saw in the film?
Well, he's a really interesting and passionate guy, as you know, and I wish I could have spent more time with him, just because the great thing about this project was, as I was working on it and making this film, I was learning the whole time, which is one of the great things about working on documentary films. But John was really generous with his time, and he's able to kind of, I think, connect the dots between agriculture and bees and pesticides and varroa in kind of a great way. And I think that, what I liked about what he said was his sort of enthusiasm and encouragement for alternative paths. There's not one way to do it. I'm not trying to lecture anybody about how farming should be done. I'm not a farmer, but I think there are some people out there that are really trying to experiment and do things differently, which are really not new techniques, but they're doing things differently to try and take agriculture in a different direction and approach it, because it's not really working the way it is now with the vast monocultures that we have and the simplification of agriculture. I mean, you can see why agriculture got simplified, because it's easier to plant, it's easier to harvest if you grow one thing. And but the downside of that is that it's not really good for the soil and for the environment. And there's a lot of costs in many aspects that come along with that.
You certainly have that right. And the other thing that these monocultures actually force beekeepers to do is, you've seen the vast holding yards before almonds, hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of colonies sitting in one field and just disappearing into the mist. I know beekeepers don't like having to do that, because when you've got thousands of colonies, you've got thousands of problems, and they're just spread out evenly over everybody. And it's I'm not going to say an unnatural, but it's certainly not the best of all possible worlds. It would be nice if we could divide that up a lot.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it was really drew me to this to do this project was the fact that I don't think people know that this happens, and that people know that bees are important to agriculture, I think, to some extent. And people know that there are problems with bees, and bees are going through some really tough times now. They don't know what the specific problems are. But I found so often that people had no idea that these commercial beekeepers move massive amounts of bees around the country. And I think it's really important to know that these beekeepers are not doing this for their own self-interest. They're doing it because they're responding to the changes in agriculture. And they're used to be that they would get a large percentage of their income from honey production. And now it's almost opposite from what people have told me, that a lot of these commercial beekeepers are getting more from pollination fees.
It sort of goes back to, what was it, about 15 years ago when Doug Wynot did the Following the Bloom book. I think that was probably the beginning of this surge. And he noticed it then, and it's only gotten bigger ever since then. And then, of course, you throw in varroa and all of the other problems that are going on. It's a tough way to make a living.
It's really hard. One of my takeaways from doing this project was just how hard these beekeepers work, and I have had the opportunity to be around a lot of hardworking people in my time working on all kinds of different films. But these beekeepers, particularly during the pollination season, almond season, is they're up all night moving bees, gets a little bit of sleep, and then they get up in the next morning, fix the equipment that broke, move things, do the paperwork, and try and catch up and during the day a little bit, and then it starts all over again. And it's just it impressed me, how hard people like Dave Hackenberg and Bob Harvey, Brett Ady, they just work. It just seemed to me like there was no good time to call them, but I could always call them, and I've always reached them, no matter what time of day it was, which is pretty astounding that they can work that hard.
Cell phones for a commercial beekeeper is your third appendage. They pretty much live on them the whole time they're moving because that's their only way to communicate. One of the things that I was also wondering about is your background in beekeeping. You said you've been a backyard beekeeper for how many years?
Just about 30 years. And I was that kid that was, could never be kept inside. I always had a real curiosity about the natural world. And luckily I had some great teachers in my life that sort of inspired that to learn about birds and learn about insects and get outside and enjoy the world. And that kind of led me almost right into beekeeping. And it's just something I was always interested in. And so, read a bunch of books about it a way long time ago and got myself a hive and started up on it, and I've just never looked back. It's endlessly fascinating to me. I'm always finding something I knew that I hadn't seen before, and I tell people kind of jokingly that I've been keeping bees for about 30 years, and some days I feel like I know a little bit less than when I started. And the bees can always keep you pretty humble.
You have that exactly right. Well, the reason... One of the reasons, before I knew that you were a beekeeper, I'd watched your movie the first time, and my wife Kathy and I were watching it together, and I turned to her and I said, "This guy's got to be a beekeeper because he's looking at things the way beekeepers look at things," and it shows up. It's really obvious that not only do you know what you're doing, but you've got that curiosity and that interest that a beekeeper is going to have in this movie. So it makes it even more interesting to me.
Well, thanks for
It's really spectacular footage that you were able to capture of the bees in flight and the high motion, the high film speed of those was really good.
Well, thank you. It's a high compliments from both of you. I really appreciate that. One of my goals was to try and show bees in a way that most people hadn't seen it before, and so using the super high speed photography was a way that I did that. I did a short film called "Dance of the Honeybee" several years ago, and it kind of inspired me to work with this very specialized equipment. And I had some great support from a camera company in New York who loved what I had done with their equipment called Able Cinetech, and their Phantom cameras is what the brand name. And it was interesting. I really wanted to show people. I mean, I think that bees are beautiful. I see them all the time. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. But I really wanted to try and show your average person, that these bees are really incredible, interesting insects, and the social life of beehives is just fascinating, and looking into that world in a way that I don't think had been done before was really my goal. And so I spent a lot of time out in my backyard. I took apart a beehive and sort of cannibalized it so I could shoot in certain ways, and I called that Studio B. So it was a great opportunity to, pretty much anytime I had an opportunity, I'd go out and film. And what was kind of interesting to me is, working in this particular world, and this goes back to my childhood, is that, if you look down in the grass in your yard and the clover fields, I would sit down and I could just lay down in my front yard with a camera, which I literally did, and found all kinds of interesting insects, and was able to capture, what would be a normal thing of bee flying in, flying out, and try and show it in a way that it was almost like a ballet, and just show it in a way that, try and show it in a way that was really beautiful and extraordinary. And I just had the best time doing it. Just found it endlessly fascinating.
It really shows in the quality of the work that you've prepared. Okay. Just from a technical standpoint, yeah. Were you shooting on film stock or is that digital?
No, it's all digital. It's a very, very specialized high speed cameras. They're called Phantom cameras, and they're made by Visual Products, and they can do. I think I shot up to 1,500 or 1,550 frames per second was about the fastest I went, and keeping it the very high resolution that I was shooting at in 4K digital. So it was really spectacular to get down there with a macro lens and extension tubes, and really kind of try and capture the beauty and wonder of the bees. And that's something that's actually interesting, that, being a beekeeper, there was something that I was able to employ in doing this, was sort of an understanding of behavior, of bee behavior, what was happening with the hive, how bees flew, how they landed, how they moved from flower to flower. And that was something that I think gave me a little bit of an advantage in capturing the bees, in particular, in the slow motion.
It was really fun. It's fun to watch.
You also did a lot of work at night, which had to be tough. Not physically tough, but I mean, just to get the light right, and the from where you had to stand so you didn't get run over, and all of those things, that was impressive also. And having been there a couple of times, I appreciated how hard it must have been to make that work, like I said, without getting run over, and being close enough to be able to show what was going on.
Yeah, it was quite an adventure. The bees at night, particularly almonds, is crazy. And it was I pretty much had in my mind that it would be, and I threw that plan out as within the first hour of working. The promise that I made to the beekeepers was that I'm not going to get in the way, I'm not going to get hurt, and I'm not going to interfere with your business. And other than that, if they're happy to have me, I'd love to be there. And so I really worked hard to try and keep that promise, stay out of the way, but know what's going on. And it happens fast. I mean, unload a tractor trailer, some of these guys that unload pallets, and the whole thing would be done in about 20 minutes. And that was it was pretty impressive. So I found it beautiful because it's at night. There's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of colored lights, and it sort of looked almost like a music video in a way to me. It's just a ballet of the bobcats and the hummerbees, zipping around was just so much fun. I really had a great time doing it. One of the other things that was really kind of interesting about what happened was that the unpredictability of it. And so I was meeting beekeepers sometimes that I didn't know, that somebody would refer me to a beekeeper that was, do some filming, and they'd say, okay, you're going to meet this guy at this Google pin here. And I was like, okay, I don't know who I'm meeting. It's the middle of the night, and it's off in the middle of the middle of nowhere in the Central Valley. And then I'd get a call and say, okay, it's not going to be 2 trucks here. It's going to be 4 trucks, and it's going to be 60 miles away. Okay. And so I would just, I'd run off and do it. And so I just sort of had to be really flexible with how I approached it. But it was tremendously rewarding, and it was just a great adventure for me.
Well, I can believe that. Jeff, have you ever been able to get out and watch the almonds?
No. Hey, maybe we should take the podcast out to the almond orchards one of these springs.
I could give that a try. This year, I'm kind of glad I'm not in Northern California, however.
Oh, we'd be a little muddy, I think.
It's wet out there this year. Peter, if you can, you do documentary films primarily, as I understand it, and I watch them. I go to theaters and wherever to watch them, but how do the mechanics of a documentary, are they different than a Hollywood movie, or how do they get distributed? Can you share a little bit of that? Because I really don't understand any of that.
Well, it's a little bit. There's no one way it happens, and that's the short story. I mean, this film was done. I originally went out to do this, and I was going to sleep in my car in order to capture the almonds because I knew I needed to get something, and I wanted to get the almond pollination. And use that as a little bit of put together a little trailer, if you will, to raise some money. Luckily, I was able to raise a little bit of money before I got out there, so I was able to get a hotel room every once in a while and a well-needed shower. But then, so most of the work in this film was done. It wasn't done for anybody. It wasn't done for a broadcast or anything. It was all done sort of on my own, if you will. My wife is a producer, and she wasn't out in the field with me, but she was keeping me out of trouble. She's a very experienced documentary producer, and so I basically, there was a lot of sweat equity. I just kept on working to try and capture the different elements that I had in mind, which was to follow a season of pollination with a bunch of different beekeepers and use that journey as a way to try and tell the story of pollinator decline and the dependence upon bees for agriculture and our food system. And so I just kept on working. You know, I'm a cameraman, and so I own my own gear. And so if I got a call from somebody and this happened, and say, we're going to move our bees out tomorrow and it's going to be in Maine, I would, if I could hop in the car and head off to Maine and start shooting that night, or Massachusetts or Pennsylvania. And so I did a lot of running around very last minute, because you're dealing with bees and agriculture and nature, none of which are predictable. So all that came together into a documentary film we edited for over a year, shaving and shaping the story down from about 200 hours of footage to about an hour and a half. And to try and tell this, it's a very complex story in that 90 minutes. And we worked really hard to try and tell an interesting, coherent, and diverse story with all the footage that we had. And so now we're at the place where we're trying to find a home for it, find a distribution home for it. And so we've been in one festival so far, and we have a couple more scheduled in Sonoma and also Newport Beach. And then we're waiting to find out about a whole bunch of other festivals throughout the year. And the hope is that we're going to find a home for the film on a broadcaster or a streaming, and I don't know whether that's going to be a Netflix or an Amazon or Hulu or PBS. All of them are, potential places that this could find a home.
Well, when you get a schedule on these people, that certainly keep us in mind so we can get beekeepers out to see it. They can't see it if they don't know where it's going to be. So the more you can share with us, the more we'll share with them. So I'm excited to get that information out there.
Yeah, thanks. It's we're going to be we have a website, the pollinators.net, and so on there will be information about where the film will be playing in festivals, and ultimately what sort of distribution will end up with the film. And the great thing about it is that beekeepers are a very active group of people, and it's a network that virtually in every state, almost every county in the country, there's a beekeeping organization, a beekeeping club, if you will. And so part of my plan is when I go to a different place to reach out to those people. And that happened in Missoula at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival when we were there. And so it's part of my initial to try and get interest in the film and get the word out. But beyond just the distribution of the film, what I want to do is really put the film out for extensive outreach ultimately. And that might be going to the, different beekeeping conventions, to go to universities, go to schools. People are already interested in doing that. And we're trying to, because this is a tool that I think that I really want to use ultimately to make people aware of where their food comes from and the importance of bees in that process. And I think that's, as our culture is 2 or 3 generations away from the farm, I think that people have lost a little bit of the touch about where their food comes from, and I want to, if people can go into a supermarket and pick up an apple and think for a second about the fact that was pollinated by an insect, whether it's a honeybee or a bumblebee or some other type of bee, that would be a great goal for me.
Well, it's certainly, good observation. About 2 generations away from being on a farm. It's about right, which is just long enough to forget most of what we knew. And speaking of farms, you worked with some farmers on there that are really doing the right thing, and I was glad to see it actually being done. You talked with there was a couple of guys that you were talking to there.
Yeah, Lucas Criswell and his father William.
Yeah.
They're down in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. He's a young guy. He's in a lot of ways, he's his dad, and he worked together. And his dad, they're a very funny funny, like amusing couple of guys, and they play off each other and they have a great time. And Lucas is really an interesting guy. He's very much a leader in this field, and he's trying different techniques to make it better for growing, better for the bees, better for the environment, better for the soil. And ultimately, it does come down to the soil. But it's interesting that a lot of farmers I found, they're looking at it from a cost perspective too, which is very interesting. That they're interested in all of those things about safety and health and environment, but it's also about the bottom line. And Lucas had kind of a great line that he said, "I like to write my name on the back of the check and not the front of the check," which is a
good observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Peter, one of the other things that I saw that was scary, getting away from farming, but not too far away, was what they're finding in beeswax. Jim and Marianne Fraser were talking about that. And certainly, they've been leading the charge on finding it, but it's scary.
Yeah, the bees, they bring things home with them, and the wax is a sort of repository for a lot of these pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides, and they bring it home unintentionally, a lot of it, and it gets stored in the wax, and the wax is kind of a sort of a repository for it, which is a little alarming. And the bees don't have a lot of choice about that. I think they have a way of sequestering stuff when they know it's there. They seal it, but it's not like they really clean house.
Well, they can't, and the wax just soaks the stuff up like a sponge. We just did a program with Reed Johnson from here in Ohio State, where they were spraying a pesticide on the bees when they were during blossom. That's about as bad as it gets. But the subtle way that the Frasers were talking about, it's there. The bees visit the flowers, they bring it back home, it goes into the wax, and then their babies are brought up surrounded by this stuff. I don't know how do you stop that?
Yeah, well, I think part of the answer is using less pesticides, less herbicides, less fungicides. I mean, I think that one of the things that we're doing, and we collectively, is we're using things that instead of using an integrated pest management system, we tend to use pesticides that are coated on seeds. And again, it's another great expression Lucas had. It's kind of like taking an aspirin in the morning because you might have a headache. Instead of seeing the problem that's there and treating for it, you're treating for a problem that you don't know exists yet. And I think that might not be the best approach for it. And so I think an overall using less pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides would be a great first step. And what's important here also is the fact that consumers, it's not just farmers that are doing this, but consumers, you go into any hardware store and you're going to find shelves and shelves and shelves of all of these products. And I think that many consumers are quick to use them without thinking about the impact that they will have and whether that's a real problem or not. And like anything in nature, once you start pulling things out, it becomes a unstable system, and you're killing beneficial insects as well as pests, and so you might be creating more of a problem, by doing that.
One of the things that was brought up in the movie that I was unaware of was the use of 7 to thin the blooms in the apple blossoms. I've never heard that before. Wow.
Yeah, it's a tough way to. It's tough on bees, or it can be.
Yeah,
anything.
Yeah,
any insect.
Yeah, it was very interesting to discover that, and of course, not all apple growers do that, or all fruit growers do that. But I guess there's something about the acidity of the 7 that will kill the bloom on some trees, and so that's why they want to thin the blooms out so they don't have too many apples on the trees, so they cut their production, have bigger apples, the ones that do survive. But is it the best thing to use? First of all, that's a question that I would ask, and I don't have the answer to that. but then it's also about communication. These growers, bees have wings and they fly, as Dave Hackenberg says. And so if, one apple orchard is using 7 and does not know that their neighbor might have bees still in there, then you can have a real problem. So I think that, communication could be a real, there could be a lot better communication amongst farmers, neighboring farmers about, hey, call up your neighbor, text your neighbor. The technology is there. You say, hey, I have to spray to thin my bees. To thin my apples. Are your bees out yet? And just that little bit of communication might save a lot of bees and make for better relations amongst farmers and beekeepers.
Definitely. That was amazing. That was one of the surprising things I heard in that movie.
We did a story not long ago on pollinating apple trees with drones, and that's what they're after. They load up a drone with pollen and they hover it over a tree and they blast the pollen down. They fertilize the king blossom and move on. And they can do it at night. But it's the king blossom that they're looking for, and that's where the money is. I'm envious that you had a chance to talk with Bill McKibben. Read his stuff. I think I've read everything that he's written. We've reviewed several of his books in our magazine, and that was a very pleasant surprise when I saw that.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He narrated my short film, and I've had the great fortune to work with him a few times on different films over the years, and he was very willing to do it. And he came in as he has an environmental background, as you say. He's a real leader in the environmental movement. And he came in, and I wanted to, because he has a great perspective on the overall system, which I really wanted somebody to be able to put forth. And he has a very direct way of laying it out for. He's not a beekeeper. He has friends who are beekeepers, but he's not. And he's not a farmer, but he understands how the whole system works. And I think sometimes it's very helpful to have somebody come in and give you kind of a broad perspective from 10,000 feet up as how the whole system works together, and to kind of elucidate what happens when you start picking it apart and simplifying it.
Yeah, that 10,000 feet view, that's what he has. His work with, it's 350 is his group, isn't it? Getting carbon dioxide.
350.org.
Yeah. And then Sam Ramsey, you talked to him. We did a program with him a while back, and his what he thinks is important is really important. His findings have been, it's changed how we think about Varroa, certainly.
Yeah, he's amazing, and I tried to get him for about a year and he was just too busy. He was finishing up his doctorate at the time that I was doing the movie, and I just kind of luckily got him right at the end. He was just a dynamic, enthusiastic guy whose work, as you say, has really changed the whole approach of Varroa to treating Varroa. And so he's and I think he's a great example of having innovative thinking that can kind of look at it in a different way and approach it from not accept his groundbreaking work is based on going back and looking at other people's work that was basically misinterpreted. And by doing that, he threw out all the work that was there and started new. And it gave everybody a new perspective on that. So I was thrilled that he wanted to be part of it. I wish I could have spent more time with him, but he's a very busy guy.
Yeah, we were lucky, I think, Jeff, to get him to sit still for an hour back then. But the parallel that you just brought up, Peter, is kind of interesting. Sam went back and looked at old stuff and interpreted it a different way, and those farmers in Pennsylvania went back and looked at old stuff and interpreted it a different way and bringing it back. So there's the parallel between these two industries is kind of interesting, I think.
I think it's true, and it's some of the techniques that these farmers are doing, as I mentioned before, are not exactly new techniques. I mean, cover cropping and crop rotation are old techniques. Our grandparents are doing that. Our great grandparents are doing that, but we've gotten away from it. And I think that a lot of agriculture has gone into more of a chemically dependent system instead of using plants and rotation and allowing that to work for us. And where we are right now, in my opinion, again, as a non-farmer, is that there are a lot of innovations in terms of technology that are very advantageous to farming, that you can do a lot more efficiently now. And I think that the combination of some of these old techniques with the new technology, whether it's computer-based organizational system or equipment, is really kind of a good time, and I think it's an opportunity for particularly for young farmers that are starting out now that can try and make small changes and make a big difference.
Well, I certainly hope some of them do. It's not working the way it is right now. Did you enjoy talking to Susan Kegley? She's always been an interesting. I use the word character. I don't mean it. She's an interesting lady.
She was awesome. I just adored her from the get-go, and she spoke so clearly and so to the point. And I think that she made so many good points in the film, and her enthusiasm for bees and insects is just palpable and infectious, so to speak. But she also, she brought up a very interesting point that I included in the film, that a lot of the changes, in agriculture, she believes are going to come from the ground up, and they're the choices that we as consumers make. That if we want to make a change in how things are grown, it's our choices that in the supermarket that will help drive those choices. And that's a capitalism system that appeals. Capitalistic view that appeals to so many people across the spectrum, and I just really enjoyed that. I mean, she was just so much fun to be with. I learned so much from her.
Yeah, and the point you just said, if there's demand, you're going to have people, but without the demand, hopefully, what she had to say, what all of these people are saying is, we'll change the demand so that farmers start looking at things a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's one of the big goals that I had, in terms of making this film, was that it's, a lot of people know that there are problems with bees, and a lot of people realize that there's a pollinator decline, and that's kind of a scary issue for a lot of people, and I think it would be really easy to make a film that was just very bleak and said, all the bees are dying and we're in trouble. But what I really wanted to do from the get-go was to try and incorporate people that are making a difference and people that are working towards that difference, and offer hope and opportunities for anybody who watches this film, that there's something as an issue that makes this so interesting to me. There's something about this issue that everybody can do something about. And I wanted to make it very actionable. And that could be really, really simple things like buying honey from a local beekeeper. They're around everywhere. Buying your choices in the supermarket, what you plant in your garden. If you're more adventurous, you could get involved in politics and try and change policy. But I think there's a whole spectrum of actionable things that people can do to make a difference in this, because it has to come from us, and it has to come from the people. And I think that was one of the most appealing things about working on this project for me, was I wanted to try and make people aware of this problem, what some of the causes are, and then also give them some sort of hopeful choices that they could make in their own life, that they could go out and make a difference.
It was fun to have, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Susan who said this, that if you don't even need to, it's the green lawns that's a problem. So if you want a green front lawn, that's fine. But let your backyard be wild. Let the dandelions come up in the back, and so it's not black and white. You can say, well, you can find a way to make it work within where you are. And I thought that was a great message.
Yeah, that was Marianne Fraser that said that, and and she's exactly right. I mean, there's something, even if you live in a city, New York City or Boston or Durham or wherever, having these little pockets of nectar and pollen through plants, whether they're vegetable plants or whether they're flowering plants, create an opportunity for pollinators to survive. if there's nothing for them to live on, they can't survive. And I think that all those little choices can make a big difference. And doing what we do, on a lawn is, having clover in your lawn is like such a simple thing, and it makes a big difference.
One of the things that I do a fair number of interviews with newspapers and things, and one of the questions the reporter almost always leaves is, well, what can I do? And my simple answer is plant a flower, feed a bee. And Zach Browning, of course, plants a lot of flowers in his bee and butterfly work. It's good to see some solutions getting bigger and better, I think.
Yeah, I think that, the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, has really, a lot of that has been sort of, I think, converted to corn and soy. And so a lot of that land that was left, traditionally was left vacant for wildflowers and natural growth has been converted. And so Zach and the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund have really worked very hard at establishing these mixes and these opportunities for forage in particularly in the Midwest and the North Dakota and South Dakotas. It's just great. I mean, they're really doing inspiring work, and working with the USGS with those projects about figuring out what the bees are eating, when they're eating it, and how it's affecting them nutritionally. You can really it's a use of technology that you can really dial in and create a very healthy environment for bees. And I think that's something that's also an important thing, is nutrition, which comes along, just like us. If we all eat Twinkies, you're not going to be healthy. But if you eat a wide variety of different things, is a healthy way for us to live, and it's the same way for bees. They need a diverse and healthy diet of pollen and nectar sources.
Well, I know Brett 80 is associated with the pollinator stewardship, and that's one of the things that they're aimed at doing, is getting bee food where there was grass, getting bee food where there was on roadsides and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of solutions that are trending. Is that the right word? I don't think we're there yet, but you can see them from here, and if we can keep them going, I hope that this film gets more of this going, because now people can actually listen to the people who are making it happen and see that it's working. So your actions here, I think, are a good hive tool for moving things along.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's the wild flowers is kind of an interesting thing, and I see it around here where I live in New York. That every once in a while I'll see a truck going down a highway that is spraying an herbicide on the side of the road, and they say, well, people don't think twice about that. But as a beekeeper, I look at that and I say, there goes a lot of habitat. There goes a lot of forage for bees, even if it's not my bees, it's somebody else's bees or other pollinators. And I think that those kind of choices, while they're convenient and maybe easy, may not be the best choices. And leaving some of those wild habitat and forage areas is a really good opportunity. Just letting those be is a really important thing for bees and other pollinators.
Right. So, how well did you eat when you were talking to Dan Barber?
Well, when we did that interview, we were actually, where we set up at Stone Barns was right next to the bakery. And I have to tell you, we ate pretty well. And that place is the Stone Barns Center for Agriculture is amazing. It's a place that I've been to, and it's a place that I've actually taken classes at. I took a class on soil there probably close to 10 years ago, just because I have an interest in gardening. And Dan is also one of those big thinkers who is able to connect the dots between the plate and the field. And it was a real honor to be able to sit and talk with him about those things. And the farm itself, the agriculture center, Jack Algier and his whole team, is really very inspiring, because they're really walking the walk about how to make these changes and work with the system in a very productive way. And what they're getting out of it is very good food for the restaurant, but they're also, a big part of their mission is to teach other people about those choices. And one quick story that I had there a couple of years ago, my wife and I went down there to visit during the day, and just they have a little cafe there, and they have a demonstration garden, and I was in there. I was looking at the flowers, and I was watching the bees and what was going around, and I heard a woman behind me say, "Is this corn or is this wheat?" And I turned around and I thought she was joking. And I turned around, she was standing there pointing at the most iconic ear of corn on a plant that I had ever seen. And I thought she was joking. I almost laughed. And then I thought, that's pretty incredible that A, she was comfortable to ask that question, and B, that she was in a place where somebody could answer that question respectfully and make it a teachable moment. And I thought that pretty much embodies what that place is all about. You shouldn't assume that everybody understands how agriculture works. It's so important to have a place where people can go learn, how food is grown, the importance of good soil, and where their food comes from.
Well, it looked like you were having fun when you were there, and it sounds like I didn't even take away that much when you were there. So thanks for the details. It sounds like I may have to drive out there.
It's worth a trip. I've been lucky enough to eat in the restaurant, and it's unlike any other place. Most people would ever eat. I mean, Dan Barber is one of the he's in the top 10 chefs in the world, and really innovative ways of looking at food and our food system.
Yeah, well, that was really interesting. That's for sure. So at the end of it all, and you're looking back at the film and the finished product, was there anything that you discovered, anything that you learned that make you reconsider how you're keeping your own bees at home? Anything you'd change as a beekeeper?
Interesting.
You gonna get a forklift?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sort of my beekeeping methods are pretty traditional. I work off of Langstroth hives, and I just have just a few hives. I like wax foundation. I like the smell of it. For me, it's a very tactile, sensory experience. I guess, one of the things that I hadn't really come through was what I do maybe affects my neighbor. And, that's in this time of Varroa, the spread of Varroa, that's kind of an important thing. It's almost like it reminds me a little bit of the vaccination debate. That my bees, if they have Varroa and they're a weak colony, then I could be really hurting somebody else's bees by doing that. So that's one thing that I thought was that I'm a little bit more on top of. I had a couple of years when I did more of a kind of a homeopathic method of Varroa treatment because I didn't want to deal with a lot of chemicals. But I found somewhere in between, and I personally have started to use Hop Garden. I think that's pretty good. It's been working for me where I am. But I think that the great thing about beekeeping for me is that it really makes me slow down and pay close attention to what's going on in the world around me, to wherever I am, to look at what's in bloom, what people are eating, what flowers the bees are on, and just I like that connection to nature that beekeeping gives me, and I never get tired of just having some time out, in a beehive and just enjoying it, because I always see something different, and I always learn something.
Yeah, I think any beekeeper would agree with you on that statement.
I was at a meeting. One quick story, yeah. Jeff. I was at a meeting this weekend, and I was on a panel, and a Q&A panel, and one of the people in the audience said, we know you get around a lot. He says, what's the one thing that you've noticed that almost all beekeepers have in common? And I think what you just said was a lot of it is beekeepers like getting together, A, because they're always going to learn something from another beekeeper, but B, they're with a whole bunch of people that don't think they're crazy. And you put your hands in a box of live stinging venomous insects, and a lot of people are going to take a couple steps back, but when you're with other beekeepers, you don't have to be that defensive, and you have that ability and time and opportunity to notice those kinds of things.
It's true. And, one of the things that I really wanted to show is just, a lot of people have a fear of bees as a stinging venomous insect. And more often than not, it's probably caused by a, incident with yellow jackets when they were a kid. But, I think that, it's important for people to understand that bees don't want to sting you because they die in the process. And they only do it when they're threatened and feel like they're in danger. And I really wanted to show people, sort of the charismatic aspect of bees and how wonderful they are. And I think that one of the people that I included in the film that sort of exemplifies that is Lee Catherine Bonner down in Durham, North Carolina, young, inspiring woman who's runs a company called Bee Downtown. And she was great. She was out there in just shorts and a T-shirt, and I thought, I would never do that. But she was out there, and she wasn't getting stung, and she just approaches it in a very gentle, caring way. And I think her whole approach, literally and figuratively, is that we need to really pay attention to these important pollinators around us.
That's really good. Well, Peter, we really appreciate you taking your time this afternoon to join us on Beekeeping Today podcast. It's really been a pleasure having you on the show, and also it's been great watching the movie, and I look forward to seeing it get out and about in the public in the coming months.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I will keep. If I can plug the website a little bit, the
Please.
Pollinators.net. The Pollinators.net is where information will be about the film as it comes forward, and I'll be sure to keep you all in touch because what you guys are doing is a great thing, and spreading the word and educating people about bees, and I think that's all of our goal.
Oh yeah, definitely, and thanks for that. I'll make sure that all the websites that you've mentioned and we've mentioned on today's show are in the show notes so that listeners can go out and research as they wish.
There's one other thing I wanted to say about just the beekeepers themselves, and one thing that I took away from working with people like Davey Hackenberg, Brett Adey, Glenn Card, just an incredible group and Zach Browning, incredible group of people that are so dedicated to their bees and really care about them. I think that some people might think that these. They move these bees around with pallets and forklifts and tractor trailer loads around the country. But these beekeepers really, really, really care about their bees. And, when you have a bee kill, like I had the misfortune of being able to film that a couple of times, it made me sick to my stomach and it really hurt them. And I could tell how much their bees really mean to them. They're not pets, but they do care about them. And I think that's something that I really took away, how hard these guys work and to do agriculture and pollination, and how much they care about what they do.
The movie is really well done, and that respect you have for the beekeepers really comes through in the movie. So it's fun to watch.
Well,
really good. Well, we'll play out on one last clip from the movie The Pollinators that is produced and directed by Peter Nelson, our guest today on the podcast. This clip is of Marianne Fraser talking about what we can do as beekeepers and as neighbors, and how we can take care of each other and all of the pollinators on the planet with our choices that we make every time we go to the store. So thanks a lot, Peter. Kim, thanks a lot.
Yeah, Jeff, Peter, thank you. This was, like I said, it was good. It's good to meet you finally, but I thoroughly enjoyed the film.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this film, and I look forward to sharing it with as many people as I can.
Well, we'll see what we can do to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We ourselves have become users, consumers of pesticides. You can see that very easily when you go to Walmart, you go to Lowe's, you go to Home Depot, and the shelves are lined with pesticides, and particularly herbicides. So, you think, well, herbicides aren't toxic. But herbicides are completely, in many places, eliminating the forage that bees require. Bees require flowers. They require nectar and pollen-producing flowers. And this widespread use of herbicide, not only in agriculture, but also by homeowners. Everybody wants a magnificent green lawn without a single dandelion or clover plant in that lawn, or a blooming flower in that lawn. That's a food desert for bees. If you want a green lawn, great. Let your front yard be green and allow the backyard to have some dandelions and clover and grow a pollinator garden. Herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides, all three of those categories are problematic for our bees. And again, it's not just honeybees, it's all of our bee species.
Well, that was a great discussion with Peter about his movie, The Pollinators. I really enjoyed that movie, and I really enjoyed the discussion.
I think, Jeff, that last little bit there you just had with Marianne Fraser, you couldn't get better advice. Grow, feed a bee, plant a flower, and let's see if we can keep away from the pesticides.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I think our industry is really fortunate to have somebody like Peter make a film like this, because he's also a beekeeper and has been one for, 28 years, something like that. So he has the insight of knowing what's important already, and he has the experience to be able to show what he thinks is important and what beekeepers think is important, and to be able to show what people who aren't beekeepers need to be able to see and to know when they watch this film. I think in the same amount of time, somebody with different or less experience would not have been as successful. So, as I said, I think we're just darn lucky to have a beekeeper be a movie maker.
I really enjoyed it, and it really showed that his love for the honeybee. Well, thanks, Kim. That about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Thank you to this episode's sponsor, Global Patties. Global Patties has been manufacturing protein supplement patties for honeybees for the past 17 years, utilizing time-tested natural ingredients, both with pollen and without pollen. Hey, Kim, did you know that Global Patties invented the paper sandwich patty design used universally these days? Someone had to think it up. They did. Check them out at globalpatties.com. That's globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great program with Peter Nelson. Also, feel free. We'd love to hear from you. Send us your comments and questions at beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. And last but not least, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener. You are the reason we're doing this. Right, Kim?
That's exactly right, Jeff. A quick word. We have fixed something on our webpage, on Bee Culture's webpage, so you're going to be able to get to beekeepingpodcasttoday.com from Bee Culture's webpage also.
Excellent. What a great combination.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, it's been fun. Until next time.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.